Been set for the regular governing board meeting for East Valley Institute of Technology. We'll begin our meeting with a pledge, and we've asked Mrs. McAfee to lead that. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are we going to reschedule 3A?
Yes, Mr. President, I would suggest if possible for us to postpone that till our next meeting.
How about B? Is that ready to go forward?
That is, yes, sir.
All right. Well, I am going to let you do that.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Doolin.
Mrs. Doolin, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. President and board members. I am lucky today because this was supposed to be Miss Kuhn, but she is not feeling well, so I got delegated this task today. And it is my pleasure. I think this might be the 10th time, right, Eric? Something like that. That it is my pleasure to award Eric Perez the East Valley Institute of Technology as the Best High School Teacher Award. Come on up. Now, really, have you won this before?
Yes.
See, I told you he's won it before. Here, come introduce yourselves.
Hi, Eric Perez, graphic design teacher. This is my 22nd year. Next year will be my 23rd, and I'm very blessed and thankful to this board, Mr. President, as well, for allowing me to do what I think God intended me to do, and that's to teach. So I'm just very grateful. Thank you to all the students and the parents and the advisory board members that still think of me very highly to win this award. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys have questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then I'll let him run off. Okay, you would think that I would be done, right? But I am not done. See, I got tasked with a lot of things today. Dr. Wilson, will you please come up to the stand and stand next to me? See, he's going to be very unhappy about this. So it is also my honor to award Dr. Chad Wilson with Superintendent's East Valley Institute of Technology Best School Leader / Principal Award.
Thank you, thank you.
You are so welcome.
Thank you. Stop. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, I don't know why you're running away. We're not done. He thinks we're done. The next award is for the East Valley Institute of Technology, which is all of you, all of us, all of our students, and the community that supports us. And we were awarded Best Public School District for the Mesa Tribune. So, that is all my presentations for this evening.
You're gonna have, Dr. Wilson, now you have to go off to Scottsdale, Queen Creek, all the other cities around.
I'm on my journey.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is, I mean,
And
Mr.
Eric,
Perez,
thank you for 22 years. I've always enjoyed seeing your class and students.
Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
so as much as I mean, Mr. Perez is a phenomenal teacher, and we're very lucky to have him, and he's well deserving. And as embarrassing as this award is for myself, the truth of the matter is, the one that matters the most is the recognition of the best public high school. That speaks to all of us, right? And for you and everybody to be able to be recognized that way, I think speaks well of not only who we are today, but who we expect ourselves to be. So for that award, I am very, very proud of. So thank you, Mrs. Doolin, for that one, not the other one.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is the minutes of the regular board meeting held April 25, 2022. Need a motion?
Move the minutes be approved.
Okay, Mr. Hobson, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Boggs?
I have a question. In the minutes, it says at the very kind of beginning that Ms. Boggs was coming late. It doesn't say in there when she arrived, so we need to add that in there.
I will.
Okay.
And I have a question about that also. Since I did come late,
I saw that you voted.
do I have a
you know,
vote?
in about like 6 or 7, yeah.
I think so.
yeah,
Because I know you were there.
I'm not
I
concerned.
can, yeah.
I think
But it
that's
needs to
fine.
be in there.
To vote, okay. All right.
You were there for the majority of the meeting. All right, so any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I had not noticed that. I would hope that there's no reason why that needs to be phrased that way. I mean, we are elected to do public service, and sometimes other things, occupy those times, and I don't think any of us show up late. I mean, we show up when we can. Sometimes there are other things. There's got to be a better way to say that.
Thank you. I'll revise that when
Okay.
Shelley came, to the
When I
meeting
could.
on her time.
On my time?
On your time.
I usually do note the time, and I did that in 8A,
Okay. 8A? Oh, never mind, I'm not reading.
when she arrived during one of the discussion items.
Yes, I'll never do it again. I will always be on time.
There we go, yeah.
Embarrass you.
All right.
I'm not sure it needs to say anything other than that a member was absent when they were absent. I mean, really.
All righty,
Well, I
thank
wasn't
you.
even there. So what can I say?
All right,
I should.
hearing no further debate, Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct the vote, please?
Yes. Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Abstain?
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke?
Aye.
McAfee?
Aye.
Hobson?
Aye.
Right, that's all?
All righty, motion carries. We have our call to the public. Have we received any requests?
No, sir, we have not.
For boring.
All righty. Item 6 is the consent agenda. All items will be considered as a group and will be approved with one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. Anyone have a request to remove anything from that?
I do not have a request, but I have a statement
Okay.
that I'd like to do. On these field trips, it's neat to see that Stephanie, is it Bonison, going to the COE. She's given up June and August to go there. I think that's neat that does that. And John Lindstrom, going to the Skills USA to be a judge, is showing some leadership skill. And we have 5 teachers going for in multiple areas of Skills USA. And I think it's great to see all those people doing that, because I know it takes a lot of work to get those students there, because I did it once. And not once, I did it several years. And I'm just proud of them. I think it's neat.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's, before we go any further, let's have a motion and a second,
Oh, yeah.
please.
I move that we vote, that we accept the items number A, the consent agenda, A through K. L as stated here.
Okay, thank you. Second,
Be quiet.
Mrs. McAfee? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion or debate or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct a vote, please?
Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke?
Aye.
McAfee?
Aye.
And Hobson?
Aye.
The motion carries.
All righty. Brings us to item 7 for personnel. Do we need to do these separately so you can describe things, or what do we need?
Whatever you would like to do, you can do them separately, we can describe them, you can do them all, if there's no questions, in one motion.
I would appreciate it go through separately, describing everything.
Okay, I'm agreeable to that, so we need a motion for 7A.
I'll make a motion for 7A,
Anybody want a second?
subscription policies.
I will second that.
Okay. Dr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, there are 3 new job descriptions we're asking for approval this evening. 2 are chief operation officers, split, a single job split into 2 different categories. One is the compliance and the other is the plant operations. One of the things that we're realizing as our organization is continuing to grow is that there are lots of different components and pieces to the organization that oftentimes were not necessarily addressed in a way that was most efficient or effective, nor was it in a way that was ultimately in the best interest of the organization, not only in terms of the actual organization day in and day out business, but also the organization in terms of protecting the integrity of the facilities. It's a gigantic task in some ways, and so for now we've opted to create 2 chief operating officer positions, one that specifically focuses on the plant operations, where individuals are slotted to teach the resources within the organization, all the way down to the number of desks that we need, as we do our construction projects, we'll be part of that team that makes sure we're on task with the construction. And then the other is kind of an encompassing piece as we look at other areas in which operations needs to have a voice and a role, but it isn't necessarily in academics, nor is it necessarily in the day in and day out facility. Things like our foster youth, things like our GED, things like the growth and development of our CAPS program, the monitoring of our satellite programs, which, as we know and I know, is a task that oftentimes should occur during the entire year, and oftentimes, unfortunately, it's left towards the end of the year. So in those 2 areas, the chief operating officer positions, we've opted to create 2. And then the third position is a student service director, and I'd like to ask Ms. Doolin to describe that position.
One of the things that I have noticed is holding us back from growth is the ability to place student in externs or to secure clinical placement. So for example, in our surgical technology program right now, we had a waiting list that we couldn't accept because we didn't have clinical placement, meaning we didn't have a place, if we admitted those students and we could teach them here on our site, in our didactic classroom, in our skills classroom, I didn't have a place to send them to do the required clinical hours associated with the program. So one of the things that we were looking at is how can we maximize across the institution? Because what we had happening is certain areas had somebody helping them find externs, like Vet Assist had one person tasked with finding placement for them, medical assisting had one person tasked for finding placement for them, and then everybody was on their own. Well, a doctor's office, for example, where a medical assistant might be, could also potentially be a clinical site for an LPN student. Depending on if that doctor goes to surgery, could be a site for a surg tech student, and depending on that practice, it could also be a site for pharmacy tech. So as you can see, or phlebotomy. So as you can see, by siloing those, we were not maximizing our ability to use those connections and potentially have one place that could take multiple students and would be interested in taking multiple students. So we're housing it under one person, and that's going to be the Student Career Services Director, and that's going to be across all of our, both campuses, all 3 campuses, and manage all of our clinical partners, because a lot of times they go together. A construction partner might be able to take a welding student, might be able to take a construction student, a plumbing student, an HVAC student. So we don't want those siloed. We want to be able to maximize our resources, and to do that, we have to have one person seeing all the pieces and connecting the advisory committee, and then also a standard for evaluating those students that are out in those precepted areas. That's the role.
I have a little bit of a concern for the plant operations. That title implies to me that that will be a person who's in charge of the physical facility, preventative maintenance, seeking people to do upgrades, repairs, so on. We've got a pretty sprawling physical plant. Some of it's aging, some not so gracefully. And some of that, you know, to me, that's a job by itself, and I'm not sure we would find a person that's adequately equipped to handle that, plus the other human resource, you know, the foster, you mentioned foster care, and the, I'm not sure this person is going to be equipped to do that well.
So those are split out into kind of two different roles and responsibilities. So the one that talks about the plant operations is more the one that you're speaking on in terms of just maintaining the facilities itself. Certainly, it's not a one-person job, and so within that is the department, for example, our grounds, our facilities. That individual will also work with us as we go through the remodel of the main campus. As well as if we continue to expand outward at the Power Campus or elsewhere. So it's an individual that his or her primary role and responsibility isn't going to be to walk the campus and do the fixes, but he or she will be responsible for walking the campus and making sure the department that has the responsibility for the fixes is in charge, is actually following through with the fixes, whether it be the remodel, whether it be the maintenance, whether it be the grounds, whether it be the new construction. That role and responsibility is different than the other half of that compliance officer or the chief operations officer that has within his or her domain special programs like the foster youth, that although there's an academic connection to it, there's a much larger piece that goes into the foster youth in terms of having the students get here, the transportation, the services, everything else, the GED program. So that's a separate position. So the roles and responsibilities aren't under one umbrella, they're under two.
Okay, well, this implies that this would be one person.
So the chief operating
So
officer.
maybe that'd be a plural, officers, plant operations. I think maybe we want to break that other, plant operations to me just means a physical plant thing and not those other items which are terribly important.
I don't think
I'm not sure what to call them, but
So
maybe a student services, well, out to career services, but there is a place for what you're talking about as far as, transportation and, these foster care issues and the human issues, I think, need to be in a different person than the plant, the physical plant.
So maybe
Can I
I'm
ask a
confusing.
question on this?
Yep.
So this position, this operations person, is an umbrella, and there'll be people that report to them that may have responsibilities for these individual things that Mr. Lane is speaking of? Is that the idea?
So the chief operating officer position is actually two individuals. And within those two individuals, they have individuals reporting to them.
Absolutely, okay. Then that would cover specific things that
Correct.
underneath their requirement,
domain.
right? Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
So that would just be a top of the tree person.
Yeah, so there's two individuals that would be at the top of the tree, and then underneath the tree, there's other individuals that support whatever branches of the tree they're supposed to support. So on one top of the tree is an individual whose branches that they're supporting largely deals with the facilities, not just the maintenance, but the desks, where students are moving, the master's, we don't have a master schedule, but where teachers are slotted to have their classes, all of those kind of day in and day out operations. The other part, which is a separate individual, is the individual that kind of does that more, the foster youth, the GED, the CAPS program, the monitoring of our satellite programs, all of which has to happen, but it's two separate individuals that have individuals reporting to them.
Right there.
All right, well, I appreciate that. I want to avoid getting too top-heavy.
So I have a question on that, along those same lines. Are we effectively, with these two positions, introducing another layer? No,
No.
we're not.
No. I mean, we're redefining the layer. So as an example, when I was the assistant superintendent, I did the monitoring of the satellite programs. When I was the assistant superintendent, I had maintenance report to me and was responsible for making sure that maintenance and Mark Howard did their role and responsibility. When I became the superintendent, I didn't fill those positions. I maintained them. I maintained the overseeing of them. So what we're essentially doing is adding a position back that I filled both as this assistant superintendent and superintendent. I just feel like I'm filling it smarter, because I think the roles and responsibilities to Mr. Lane's perspective are uniquely different. And as one individual, I was responsible for all of it, and I don't think I had the capacity to do well for all of it.
So one is pretty much compliance to regulatory issues, and the other is more localized in the physical,
Correct,
okay.
correct.
Okay, one more question, if I might. I don't know if I just cut someone else off, but as I was reading through the description, it appears that both of those positions have the obligation to do staff evaluations and reviews and those kinds of things, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is that standard to most contracts, that the contracts undergo a review? Like, is it a performance evaluation, or what is that?
So, yes, so in our organization, we have evaluations that are defined either for teachers or for classified staff, and so those tools are utilized to evaluate whatever the individual is within the domain that that person supervises. So, yes.
So prior to these two positions being invented, you would have been the
Yes.
one doing those?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Dr. Wilson, this kind of goes along to a topic that we had several months ago about how since
That's what you were
EVIT's
working
growing
on,
so
isn't
much, we got Power Campus, we got all these other things, that it becomes a situation where if there's only one person where all of these people are reporting to, it gets a little convoluted. For instance, my agency, I have 6 department heads or chiefs. And my chief, and each one of those then has those functions below them. And what it does, it allows me to have a leadership team that I can get that information driven to me all the time. And I think we just got and I think we saw this a few months ago.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's a great idea. So
Well, it's-
whatever you call the title, it's a great idea to do that.
Thank you. I think it does speak back to some of the conversations you all have had with me around the idea that as part of my maturation and growth is that I can't be the sole reporter to within the organization, that's not sustainable. In doing this reconfiguration too, if you'll remember that we also eliminated the typical building principal position. So as we redefine roles and responsibilities and we refill positions that we at one time had but I didn't fill yet, we've also reduced positions that currently exist in order to be mindful of administrative top heaviness. It's always been my goal to have administration as close to 10% as we can, and that's where we're still trending towards.
It looks pretty flat for an organization this big to me, so.
And to Mrs. Doolin's point, the student service director, and we'll talk to you about this more as it unpacks, but one of the things that we keep working towards is what does year 2 look like within the organization, right? And I think that what Mrs. Doolin's describing is creating an opportunity for us to be really proactive in having year 2 students get a uniquely different experience than what they are currently getting or what they potentially would be getting at their home high school. And this helps facilitate that.
Okay, so I do have a question about the Student Career Services Director. So part of that job description said that one of the requirements was a master's degree in a related field. As we know, this is the twofold responsibility. One, for half of the job would be that of career counseling and counseling, that sort of thing, right? And the other half would be knowledge about the field of industry that they're counseling about. So when we're looking at a master's degree in a related field, what would be defined, or can you give me an example of related field? Are we going more heavy on the counseling aspect of it, the student care aspect of it, or more heavy on the industry field related?
It's more heavy on the industry-related field. Because the East Valley Institute of Technology is very unique in the fact that we are placing students in jobs. So we really needed someone who understood the importance of the technical trades and those externs or clinical hours. But we also needed someone who is able to talk in depth about what we do here and bring people on board, as well as that this same individual will be guiding our advisory boards, because we have learned that the advisory boards are where we find clinical. That's where we find external opportunities, is by bringing business and industry in partnership with us. And so by having one person kind of make sure that everybody's doing the same template, doing the same advisory, that we're reaching out. I'll give you an example. We've had events here on this campus where everybody hasn't been reached out to as far as our business partners, and feelings have been hurt because they're not housed in one place. So when someone leaves, we don't know who was on their advisory committee. And so then our students lose opportunity. So we're really looking at someone who can house that, manage that data, and keep the relationships going despite turnover that may occur, and establish a process that everything across the board looks similar and is easily accessible.
Okay, one
Our
last.
creditors are also asking for this. I will put that caveat
Okay.
in it as
Okay.
well.
One last question about this. Where does the Student Career Services Director show on this hierarchy, this organizational chart? Not there?
It's probably not on this one.
Okay,
I can tell you who they report to if that's
Yes,
helpful.
I'd be interested.
Academics.
okay.
They would be underneath academics.
the CAO.
Because as part of this, there's going to be credit associated, which means we have to align the standards and outcomes to what they're doing out in the field in order to reward credit and have evaluations and documentation to support their learning that they're obtaining in real life experience. So all of that has to be crosswalked.
Thank you, Ms. Doolan.
You're welcome.
All righty. Any further discussion of that item? Let's have a vote, Mrs. Doolin, or Mrs. Boggs, I'm sorry.
Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke,
Aye.
McAfee. Aye. And Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. That brings us to item 7B, position changes. Who would like to take that one on?
Ms. Perez.
Ms. Perez, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. This is a continuation of what Dr. Wilson was discussing regarding us having the opportunity to readjust the current positions. In this particular case, these are positions that are currently vacant, and well, in most cases, either currently vacant or the title does not align with the current duties or the direction that the district is taking. So we're not adding these positions, and so in this particular case, we have the adult ed. We previously had an adult ed assistant director, so we're requesting that to be more of the data specialist because that is one of the roles of responsibilities that we've identified that we need. The adult ed assistant director had that within their role. We're now wanting to make sure that it's consolidated into just that. The assistant principal role, again, when you look at the prior organizational chart, we followed the assistant director principal because we were heavily focused on the secondary, but in the direction that we're taking, we want to make sure that all of those directors are having the director title as opposed to the assistant principal. We also, again, as we continue to grow, we have our support staff team. It also needs to be expanded. With the role of that is the request to have our current HR generalist to transition into the role of the HR manager because that is basically the role that she has been taking, just was not at that level before. State reporting, that again, changing that to the analytics and reporting. And the last one is a warehouse assistant, again, with the goal of increasing our warehouse. Given what we do with the industrial trades and many of the other programs, there's a lot of supplies that all of our disciplines use. So we would like to expand our catalog of warehouse items to minimize the time that our programs are having to wait for delivery of goods and services. So that is the request to have that transition to become a warehouse supervisor instead of just an assistant.
Backwards from what I was lost. All the jobs already filled in.
I have a question. Is this just a title change or is there a big salary change as well?
So part of this, we did a salary analysis in most cases. In those cases where it did impact the salary increase, it's added to a different agenda item. That's why we kind of shift the order of those, because we wanted to make sure if these were approved that obviously those items would be applicable in there.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Ms. Boggs, will you conduct a vote?
We need a motion.
Need a motion to approve.
Oh, we
I'd
have
like
a
to move
motion?
that we accept
Yeah, we-
Personnel B as described.
I'll second.
Just, are we so Okay, point of clarification, so
I
I know
guess
what I'm
I-
voting on. In the document that we have been looking at, it does have a salary associated with the title change, but we're going to be addressing those salaries later in, okay, so,
Right, so to clarify, the salary is the base salary guideline, so if we were to fill those positions in the future, that would be the base guidelines, similar to like the equivalent of the salary schedule that you have been previously approving. We just want to make sure that, because you're approving a title change, should you approve a title change, we also want to make sure that you approve a.
the base salary change that's according to the schedule that we've already approved.
Correct.
Okay, so the salary, the compensation that we are voting on with this vote then is associated with the schedule as it already currently exists that corresponds to the title change.
To the title change,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now we can conduct the vote.
Any further discussion? Ms. Boggs?
Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke,
Aye.
McAfee,
Aye.
and Hobson.
Aye.
And motion carries.
Okay, let's do this a little more gracefully than 7C, fiscal year 22-23 hiring guidelines for administrative and other staff. I'll entertain a motion
Also move.
and a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Looks like Mrs. Perez, you're on the spot again.
Yes, in prior board meetings, you have approved the salary schedules for the exempt hourly positions. This is just a continuation of that to make sure that you also approved an updated administrative schedule for administrative positions and other support staff that were not previously addressed.
So this is outside what we've already looked at?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, what we have for the teachers, and now we got to do administrators.
Yeah, we got to go through the whole thing now.
Then we get to do our raise next. We get to add a 0 to it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, are these hard-to-fill positions?
I don't have, I should turn them over and look at them in front of my face. I know some of them are. I can tell you that when we were looking for the LPN director, that's a very difficult position to find. Thank you. So some of them are very difficult to fill and difficult to keep filled. One of the things that we discovered is through the process of raising teacher salaries with the director positions, there wasn't any variance. And that was causing, at least in the nursing, within the nursing area over in health, that was causing some contention as the directors were basically on par with the faculty.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? Mrs. Boggs?
Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke,
Aye.
McAfee,
Aye.
and Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Brings us to item D, 7D, for personnel. I'll entertain a motion.
Also move.
I'll second.
And a second, Ms. McAfee.
I'll second. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything we need to know about this, other than what's been provided?
No, sir.
All right, anybody have questions, concerns, comments? Okay, Mrs. Boggs.
Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
All right,
Boggs is an aye. Luke,
Aye.
McAfee,
Aye.
and Hobson.
Aye.
okay, 7E, new hire of instructional staff contingent upon receipt of CTE teaching certificate and IVP clearance, fingerprint clearance card. I'll entertain motions.
Move 7E, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
I'll second.
thank you. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Boggs?
Freedom,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke,
Aye.
McAfee,
Aye.
and Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. This brings us to item 8A. It's a first read, so we won't be taking action on it. I'll ask our Attorney Kevin Colbell to fill us in what the high points are.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. At the last meeting, there was some discussion about solicitation of donations, and there were some parameters that were specified that should be conditions of teachers soliciting donations, and I believe I captured them all, but if I didn't, now would be a good time to tell me so I can revise it before it's approved. But that is basically,
I think you did a very eloquent job. Okay?
These are just going to be added, right? Nothing is going to be taken away, or is this replacing?
This is brand new.
this is
well,
brand new. We didn't have a
It's a okay.
previous policy. And I included the existing policy and regulation because it's incorporated by reference in there, so you could have a full understanding of what I'm proposing.
All right.
Wait, say that one more time. What does the current policy and regulation PDF stand for? There's two PDFs associated
Oh,
with
yeah,
this?
those are existing
So there
policies.
are
That
existing
And
policies.
that was my
Yeah,
question.
but that wasn't about solicitation of donations, that was just donations in general. So this is specific to solicitation, and because I cross-referenced the existing regulation, I just put it in there so you'd understand.
So
without
it's
having to go look it up
additive.
yourself. Correct.
Further clarification.
Yes.
All righty. Thank you.
Can you tell me what KCDA, I know, I should probably know this. What does KCDA stand for?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's just a labeling system that the Arizona School Board Association came up with.
Got it.
So our policies are divided into sections A through K or L, and then they're subdivided. They could have done it with numbers, it would have been easier.
Okay. Oh, well,
You
okay.
can't have it easy.
It's a bullet point
There's
system.
a copy of
basically.
those in your book.
I have it right here, too.
Okay. All right, let's move along to item 8B, ASBA legislative agenda. Dr. Wilson, would you like to launch that discussion?
Of course, Mr. President, members of the governing board, every single year, the CTE consortia meets and gathers together and has discussion about items that they believe might be in the best interest for ASBA to have as part of their lobbying effort. I know as a governing board, we still are wrestling whether we want to stay with ASBA or not, and this is somewhat independent of that, because if we decide to step away from ASBA, then no longer would we be advocating for these. But these are items that were presented, were agreed upon by the consortia, and each of the CTED districts are bringing them to their governing board for discussion and possible adoption. It's not an action item on this agenda and may be an action item in the future, but I wanted you to be aware of what the other CTEDs were interested in having as part of their lobbying effort and see if there's interest by EVIT to join in that advocacy as part of the consortia, which we belong to. Clearly, we have our own lobbying too, which is, a good thing. But I believe it's important that you all at least are presented with what other CTEDs are asking their lobbyists, are lobbying through the CTED consortium to send to ASBA.
Dr. Wilson, I have a question here. There's nothing in here that seems to be troubling or anything, except I would encourage the change to rid any of this submission. Equity or equitable has nothing to do with equality. Number 3, increase access and equity should be increase equal access. And equitably invest should be equally invest in technology modernization. Equitable is simple as this. If you're an 8-foot tall basketball player, you have to play on your knees with the 5-foot basketball player. There's nothing equal about it. It's equitably. Equitably is a troubling word to me. It's just troubling.
If I may, I'd like to speak to that. This process with ASBA is,
We can't change.
this is prior to the, they'll have a Saturday meeting to ratify, amend, add to this list of legislative priorities, and each district is entitled to elect one board member to represent their district to cast a vote. And it's an all-day thing on these items and new items people bring, and so that would be the forum to address the change of language.
That would be my dream.
So here in the next couple of meetings, we need, I think the meeting's in July or 1st of August, somewhere
Correct.
around there.
And certainly by then too,
I've been to a few of them.
I think this board's gonna have to decide whether it wants to stay with ASBA too. I mean, that's part of the discussion that we're gonna have to have in the next couple of weeks. And depending upon that, then that drives some of the next chapters. My intent and goal was just to get in front of you what the consortia is advocating, and we can bring it back again at a later time for further discussion, both in the context of these specific items as well as the EVIT's position as it relates to ASBA.
What month do we have to renew by?
July 1st. So between.
And then they meet in July?
I think
This legislative agenda happens in probably August, late July or August.
Yeah.
Then it's not gonna
It's
matter.
always in the summertime, it's usually blazing
Have to
hot.
join. It's not gonna matter. We're gonna be
That's
done.
what I remember.
We're gonna stay with us, so it won't matter.
But each district, and they just, you're going to cover, that meeting will cover the entire legislative agenda for all schools that fall under ASBA, not just the CTEDs.
Right, so, but we will have had to make a decision by then to leave, so it won't matter, in my opinion.
If we
When they
choose
meet.
to do that.
Yes, I think that, the next discussion this board needs to wrestle with, and we can bring it back at our next meeting, is the position with ASBA. I mean, certainly, our ability to interact with and collaborate with Westmac is a bit difficult right now, given kind of some of the situation that they're in. So I think this board wrestling with its role and responsibility and desire or not to stay with ASBA would drive then what happens next with this, right? But I didn't want to bring this to you after the fact and wanted you at least to have it in front of you. So should you stay to choose to stay, you already are privy to what the other CTED consortia are interested in. If you choose to not stay, then no harm, no foul.
In these 6 ones, Dr. Wilson,
I'm sorry?
the 6 submissions here that they have, written the way they are, which can be changed, which of these do you think EVIT really would like to support?
Well, we will have the
I
opportunity
know.
to,
I just want your opinion.
we'll have the opportunity to, as a district participating, to submit our own agenda, which may or may not include these things.
Unless we vote to not renew.
Okay.
Correct. So, Mr.
You don't have to answer, it's okay.
I'll be happy to.
They don't want to hear it.
I think one of the things that's interesting about the consortia is that I think the consortia should be about supporting what's in the best interest of all within the consortia. I think part of the reason why you all were wise in bringing in an additional lobbyist to work with us is because that lobbyist focused specifically on EVIT-related issues, right? And so the consortia is kind of about all of the CTEDs, and then I think each district has the ability, if they choose to kind of get their own, to kind of advocate for what they are most interested in. So, having said that, when I look at this list, one of the things that I do think has merit to it is the funding formula for transportation. Because I think at the end of the day, that is a barrier to our partnering districts as well as to all of the CTEDs, in that the funding formula isn't equitable enough, and it doesn't necessarily pay the cost for transporting students from sending districts to the central campus. So out of all 6 of those, I think the transportation is the one that most directly impacts all of the CTEDs. Most directly, not all the CTEDs.
Well, the year 13 funding would certainly affect us.
The what?
The year 13, 9 through 13.
Item
First
number
item.
1.
It can. I think that's a much longer conversation.
Of course.
Yes, I think that item 4 is somewhat concerning to me, and I'll be honest with you, because what that is leaning into is changing the authorization for CTEDs. And one of the things that we committed to when we pursued our associate degree is that we're not leaving our core mission. Our core belief is that we're here to serve high school students. That's what foundationally is what we're about. We just want to be able to have the opportunity to do more. I think what that does is it reauthorizes so that it takes the focus off of high school. And I don't think that's good business for CTED across the state.
Would those students, would we get per diem for them through age 21? Is that what they're trying to say?
I think that's the lean into it, that it would be funded from the state through age 21.
So they could
That already
actually come here
happens in
to
public
get the
schools.
AA degree or whatever we're trying to get for free, or that's just high school credit?
So I think the idea behind it would be similar to the conversations we'd had as we were pursuing the AA degree, that it would be targeted more for individuals that weren't interested in pursuing, if they graduate from high school, they weren't interested in pursuing the AA degree, they would get post-secondary workforce development. Again, so it would be specifically for individuals that wanted the certification, not to pursue the AA. I think, again, that becomes problematic, because I think one of the things you guys were really wise in is not to create something that took our sight off who we are. It was something that allowed us to continue to grow into becoming who not only we are, but also who we expect ourselves to be. I think this reauthorization takes the sight of what CTEDs are created for by reauthorizing to age 21.
Yeah.
But I'll bring it back. This was just information for you to have out there, and we'll come back with more discussion.
Thank you.
All right.
Next.
Any further comments before we move along? Next action items are satellite programs, 9A, and budget revisions, vet science. Do we need to go through those separately and individually, or should we combine those?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, I think you can combine those, but certainly we would be happy to go through them individually if that would be your druthers.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for 9A through D.
I'll move to discuss 9A through D, combining them all. Does that work?
We have a
They're
second?
action items.
Yeah, we have to have,
You said discussion. I
Discuss,
think
are
it's-
they action items?
Yeah.
Okay, to approve,
well, you're gonna move the items.
move the items so that we can.
I'll second the motion
Mr. Covington, thank you.
of the action items.
All right, Dr. Wilson, are you prepared to speak on the satellite programs at J.O. Combs?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, as is the case in all of the years, the EVIT CTED is responsible for approving programs that are offered at our satellites. We monitor those programs based on the criteria that's in statute, and currently that criteria consists of those indicators that you see in your backup. What we do is in programs that have existed, we ask the sending district to provide information that we verify, and if it's a new program, we actually go and walk the campus. Truth be told, we have been not as diligent in walking the new programs as we would like to, although part of the job description that was approved a bit earlier will provide some flexibility in that. So J.L. Combs is the first district that we are monitoring this year. The monitoring was done by Mr. Fisher.
Okay. Budget revisions.
Brad?
Mr. President,
They did one at all.
We moved to all four.
so the budget revision, as you may recall, back in December, the board approved a budget revision because it was a requirement through the legislative process. So we addressed the majority of the larger revisions that were necessary. In this particular case, when we reconciled the ADM that was estimated versus actual ADM through the last reporting period, there was a net decrease of about 81 ADM. Which resulted in a reduction of about $364,000, which was then reallocated within our expenses. In this particular case, we reduced, some of the reductions that you see is under contracted services through janitorial, because at the same time, while our ADM was reduced, our federal funds were increased, federal COVID-related funds, and so we reallocated some of those janitorial expenses towards that. So we did a shift of funds that were allowable under the grants, but overall the net to the M&O budget is about $364,000.
Okay. So that's not necessarily going to hamper our operations for this school year?
Correct, because part of that also is, it's the allocation that's passed through to the sending districts. So depending on who specifically had the decrease in the ADM, that reduction will be impacting that district or EVIT central campuses accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Let's go move to C, the Veterinary Science RFP. Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I will address that as well. So both of these, the items C and D are RFPs that were posted through our AC purchasing, and we notified all the vendors that are listed on, under the AC purchasing that have items that support the request. As you can see in the supporting documentation, we gave you a summary of who were interested in, well, in the fact that we only had one that submitted. We did have a second one that was submitted late, so based on procurement rules, we rejected that. So the recommendation is to award it to Midwest Vet Supply.
Okay, thank you. And finally, cosmetology, barbering, and aesthetic supplies. Aesthetics. We need some anesthesia.
That's easy for you.
Similar process applied in this particular case. It's a multi-vendor award. So in this case, we are recommending that the award be issued to all of the vendors that submitted the a response.
There's only two that really responded, isn't there? For veterinary?
No, for vet was one, but in this particular case, for the cosmetology, we had three.
Three, okay. And so who is,
Cosmetology,
who are we
three.
going with?
We're making the recommendation to issue a multi-vendor awards to allow us the opportunity to use all of them.
Okay. So they're all pretty close.
Yes. And some vendors do not provide all of the supplies that are needed for some of our programs. That's why the recommendation is to award it to all.
Keep supply in hand, right? Good.
Do we have any further questions or concerns? Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct a vote, please?
Yes. Fleetum,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, Luke. Aye. McAfee
Aye.
and Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. So we have an executive session for three different items.
Can we make one motion for all three?
I believe that would be appropriate.
May I make that motion? I'd
Okay,
like to go to executive sessions for A, B, and C. One motion.
I'll second that.
all right. Any concerns or discussion? Mrs. Boggs, can you conduct the vote, please?
Fleetum,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, Luke.
Aye.
McAfee.
Aye.
Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. President, members of the Governing Board, we've set up the fishbowl.
We don't hear you.
How about now?
Now we do. Okay. We're resuming our public meeting for the East Valley Institute of Technology. We're coming up on item 11. A, we are removing from consideration at this point, and I'll entertain a motion for B and C.
Mr. President,
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
move that item B and C, that we instruct the superintendent and director of legal services to offer the contract as discussed in executive session to the two individuals.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct a vote, please?
Fleetum,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Luke,
No.
McAfee,
Aye.
Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. That brings us to our superintendent's report. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, just a couple quick items. First, as a reminder, our completion ceremonies are this Monday and Tuesday at Sloan Field. Tammy will reach out to you and make sure that you have all the information. You're obviously VIP guests and are invited to be up in the box. But if you haven't been to one of those, I would encourage you to please attend. It's really an impressive sight to see, and I think I've said this to you before. One of the things that's most impressive is we ask our students to wear their sending district caps and gowns. So you're up in the stands and you're looking down literally on thousands of young people who have participated with us in their opportunities, representing colors from all over the valley, and you really get to see the magnitude of the impact we have. So I really would encourage you, if you can, to please come, and Tammy will work with you to make sure you have all the information. Second item, you'll be happy to know that we pulled the permits for our water meters today out at Power, which means that... Which,
Bring them out?
yeah, I said we go to Home Depot and just buy them, but apparently you can't do that. Which means that we're on track to have the buildings open and the renovation on Verona completed before the start of school year in August, which is good. There's still going to be some work that needs to be done on Power, but we can do that, a little bit later. So that was an issue that we were struggling with, and we were fortunate enough to get to the finish line on that. And then last but not least, and correct me if I'm going to say it wrong, Ms. Perez, it's a RFQ for the main campus remodel and renovation is expected to go out this week. That takes us one step closer towards being able to be in a position sooner rather than later of making sure that we're meeting the needs of this campus like we're working to meet the needs out at Power. So a lot going on, but I encourage you, if you can, Monday, Tuesday, or one or both, and then we look forward to having the construction done at Power for opening in August. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so that brings us to calendaring. Our next scheduled meeting is June 13th. We're not going to have a second meeting. Okay. So I guess we'll resume our summer schedule at that point.
Yes.
And then we'll go from there. Anything else anyone would like to see on the calendar or future agenda? Hearing none, that moves to 13B, which is adjournment, and we'll do that by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.